It was a complete surprise to me. I was in India. I had gone to actually to present at the Jaipur Literature Festival, which is like one of the biggest festivals in the world. And I get this email from Gulf Coast Reads saying, "We've picked your book." I was like, wow, I was very thrilled and excited because I love the idea of a whole community reading the same book and having that same common cultural experience. It's so rare nowadays because our lives are so fragmented. We each live in our own little bubble, so to speak. And it's wonderful to come together with a book. So I'm very honored that my book was picked. One amazing thing is an exploration of how people might act in a situation of life-threatening seriousness, an urgent situation. What might you do if you found yourself with a group of strangers and your life was in danger? That's kind of the question the book answers. So right in the beginning of the book, there's a group of people, 9 people, strangers to each other pretty much. And they're in the Indian visa office. 7 of them have gone to the visa office to get visas to go to India. So this is taking place in the United States, and 2 of them work in the office. And this is in the basement of a high-rise building, and suddenly there's a major earthquake. A major, major earthquake. They lose electricity, they lose cell phone coverage, they're trapped in there, the building is collapsing around them. And now they have to deal with that. And things get worse, the situation gets worse as time goes on, and they begin to panic. And then one of them says, look, we're just turning on each other, panicking. We got to deal with this better. Why don't we occupy ourselves by telling each other a story out of our lives, something we've never told anyone else, one amazing thing. And so then they begin to tell these stories. So then the book takes place on 2 levels. One is the world of the stories, each one different. And the other is what's happening in their lives as the situation gets more and more urgent. I'm always amazed by how ideas come to me. I mean, they're always gifts. They come when I'm not expecting them. And this one, certainly, I wasn't even thinking of writing. This was on a day that was kind of urgent and dangerous in itself. You remember in 2005 when Hurricane Rita was coming towards us and the city authorities decided to evacuate us? So, well, I was on I-10 going towards San Antonio with like 500 other cars. And we were stuck. We were like completely stuck for about 3 hours. We hadn't moved more than maybe like, I don't know, half a mile. And people were panicking. This was late at night. This was like 2 a.m. And people were panicking. The hurricane was coming closer. And I began to see all kinds of panicky behavior. And some people started behaving very badly and like fighting with each other. But there were some people who, it was like the situation brought out the best in them. And they would go around trying to calm people, sharing water and food, helping the elderly, helping people with little children. And so the writer part of my brain kicked in and started thinking, well, why is it that some people behave this way and some people behave this other way? Why is it that the same situation of tension brings out the worst in someone? Really, the others, it's like they rise to grace under pressure. So I said, if I live through this, I'm going to write a novel about it, exploring this, and exploring can strangers be transformed into a community that cares about each other. And so that's how I came to write One Amazing Thing. There have been many stories. There's a whole tradition of books that are about many stories told by each one of the characters. So a novel made up of stories, and a novel that's focused around storytelling. Well, Canterbury Tales, of course, in poetry, but it has the same idea, and Boccaccio writes the Decameron. So that also has a similar theme. And there are even movies in, recent times that deal with stories. So I had all of those in the back of my mind. And in fact, one of the characters in the novel is reading at that time. She's a graduate student, so she's reading the Canterbury Tales. And that actually gives her the idea to share stories. I think that would be a very interesting assignment, to compare it to the Canterbury Tales or modern retellings or even modern films that retell, like The Breakfast Club, right? So I think that would be fun for students to read this book and to see maybe The Breakfast Club, and to compare a book with a movie and talk about how a book develops stories differently from how a movie develops them. That would be one. Comparing to the Canterbury Tales would be one. Comparing this book to other disaster tales books, that would be interesting, where people are placed in life-threatening situations. How do they behave? Even something classic like Moby Dick, that would be an interesting way, because Moby Dick, in that book also, people are on a voyage. In this book, people are thinking of going on a voyage. The idea of travel, why do we go to different places? There could be an interesting assignment around that. I just want to reiterate that I hope many high school students will read this book. I think if you are, if you're a reader who wishes to challenge yourself, this is a wonderful book. I think it's very appropriate for high school reading, and I certainly hope that people will read this book and then maybe come on my Facebook author page and ask me questions, and I really try to answer all of my questions. And if you just do a Google search saying Chitra Divakaruni Facebook, you'll get to my page. No, actually, I had no plans to be an author at all. And it was several years after I moved here to the United States, and I moved here for graduate school. That's when I started writing, very tentatively, just kind of putting down some experiences of having grown up in India, mostly because I felt I was forgetting things, and I didn't want to forget it. I didn't want to lose that. That's what made me start writing. And then I was very interested in the immigrant experience, because it had been a very transformative experience for me. I had found myself in a world very different from the world I grew up in India, where I came from a very traditional, very sheltered kind of family. So I wanted to write about how immigration transforms us, and how we, by living in a different country, transform that country as well. And I think those two desires made me become a writer.
So what were you going to graduate school for?
I was going to become a professor of literature. I always loved reading, and that certainly helped me when I decided to become a writer. But I didn't think I would be a writer all through my formal schooling. It was only afterwards I started writing very much by myself, kind of in secret. Since I do a number of other things, I teach at the University of Houston, for example, I don't get like very long stretches. If I can get about 4 hours at a time, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, I'm really happy with that. But I do like to get at least that much, because I'm working mostly on novels. And novels are larger, so the units are larger. And it would be nice for me to be able to complete a scene when I sit down. And then the next time I might revise that scene. But if I stop in the middle, it's much harder to get back into the feel of that world. I write many different kinds of books. Right now I'm writing mostly novels. One amazing thing is a novel. The novel that came out before that was titled The Palace of Illusions. I write books that are set in the United States. I write books that are set in India, some that go back a long time. Palace of Illusions is the retelling of an Indian epic, the Mahabharata. But I'm retelling it from the point of view of the main woman character, or one of the main female characters. So that goes back 5,000 years. One amazing thing is very contemporary. I also write for children. I write for young adults. So I have many kinds of books that I write. One of my books, The Conch Bearer, which is for young adults, was chosen as a Bluebonnet list book. So I was very pleased. I did a lot of talks in schools in the Houston area, and I like that a great deal. I also write poetry. You know, Mark Twain has a wonderful quotation which I recently put up on my Facebook author page where many readers come. And he says, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says that if you don't read, then you are no better off than a person who can't read. So you're closing off an entire world to yourself. And here, you know, society or your family has given you this great gift. You're able to read. If you don't use that, then your life becomes very narrow. You never have anything beyond what you're just experiencing in your personal life. Whereas books open us up to worlds and different periods of time. And just, I mean, books are just so much fun. I really want people, young readers especially, to just get a sense of that fun that's in books. If you love books, you'll never be bored. You will never be bored in your whole life. Now, wouldn't you like to live a life like that? Well, first of all, I hope they'll enjoy the story. It's an exciting story. It's a suspenseful story. Here are these people. They're trapped in this situation. Are they going to live? Are they going to die? Here are these people. In the beginning, they're all suspicious of each other. Are they going to overcome that suspicion? If so, how would they do it? Why are they all there? Why do they all want to go to India? Each one has his or her own story. And so I want students to enjoy all of this. But also I want them to think about some of the themes, which is the theme of community. How do we build community? Which is the importance of our own stories, giving value to our own lives. Remember I was telling you how at a point one of the characters says, let's tell each other stories. So one of the other characters is very resistant, and she says, I don't think anything has ever happened to me that you'd be interested in. And so then the first character comes back and says, no, in everyone's life, there are stories. There's at least one amazing thing. And I want students to think about that, to give value to their own stories, and hopefully to share their stories. I think some great writing assignments could come out of this, where students do tell stories which maybe they've been reluctant to share with people. The ideal time is in very early childhood, because I think one of the things that I'm very thankful for is that when I was little, I had a grandfather who told me a lot of stories. And he would just call all of us cousins, and he lived in the village where I would go for holidays. And he'd light a lamp, we'd sit around the lamp, and he'd tell these wonderful stories. And those are some of my happiest memories of childhood. So I hope that we can revive storytelling. It's not difficult. It doesn't cost anything. Just takes a little bit of time. It's a wonderful way to connect with our children. And I'm very pleased that in our libraries we do storytelling. I think that's very, very special. And I hope that'll keep happening more and more. Well, I am actually often amazed that I did become a writer and people are reading my books and they're interested in my stories. That itself is amazing. But I think I did have an amazing incident where many years back when I was traveling in the Himalayas, in the mountains in India, and I was in a very dangerous situation myself, and someone came, a stranger, he saved me. And I never saw him again after that. So it was just, that was quite amazing for me. So sometimes I think back on this person who just, who just kind of appeared. I'm working on another novel. I'm working on a novel that that's about family secrets and how secrets in a family can really change your life. If you come to know the secret, it can completely change how you thought of yourself and where you saw your place in the world. So it's about this young woman who's growing up in India, and on the eve of her wedding, she's just engaged to this person she loves very much. She finds out a secret about herself, which changes her whole life. And she says, I have to deal with this secret before I can move on with my life. So, does that sound
That sounds very good.
And that secret is going to bring her from India to the United States. I would say two things. One is read widely. If you're going to be a writer, you just have to read, because that's how you learn. You learn from reading the great books, the great books that were written a long time back, but also great books that are coming out right now. Read some of the literary magazines like the New Yorker and the Atlantic Monthly, and here at the University of Houston we have Gulf Coast. So read that, because then you see what's being published and you learn a lot from the new voices. And then I would say write regularly. So read widely and write regularly. Just get practice. That's how we get better. And then there are so many wonderful programs. I recommend that they participate in programs like Writers in the Schools, or, Rice University has a summer program. InPrint has other programs for community members. We are very fortunate in Houston because I think we have a thriving literary community. So I would tell them to get plugged into those, to go to reader events whenever a writer comes into town and gives a reading. If you can, go see what's going on, listen to the writer, ask questions. I think all those things not only give you information, but they inspire you to become a writer.